Stents, angioplasties, a quadruple bypass, even a heart pump. Name the procedure. Former Vice President Dick Cheney has had it and lived to tell about it. Cheney's out with a new book called Heart, an American Medical Odyssey that documents the decades of heart disease that has plagued him. Even in the White House, he sat down with CNN's Dr. Sanjay Gupta in an interview that aired last night on 60 Minutes. Cheney revealed one uncanny consequence of those operations, that his doctor had a real fear that terrorists might hack into the vice president's heart defibrillator and kill him. Sound like science fiction? Well, pretty close. It was actually a plot line on Homeland, on Showtime, and one that Cheney doesn't think is out there at all.
I'm killing you.
What did you think when you watched that?
Well, it was an accurate portrayal of what was possible.
Incredible. Let's bring in our panel. CNN political commentator and Republican strategist David Frum, CNN political commentator and Democratic strategist Hillary Rosen, and senior congressional correspondent for Politico, Manu Raju. So, David, the Wi-Fi on the president's defibrillator was turned off before the 2007 operation, but this is all to say Dick Cheney is one heck of a survivor. I mean, I suspect all of us will be gone and buried before he even gets another cold. Were you aware of any of this stuff going on when you were at the White House?
Well, we all knew that he had heart troubles there, that he himself constantly made references to it. And as you know, the vice president offered before the 2004 election to step down, partly for health reasons, also to give President Bush a new start. But make no mistake, as vice president, especially in the first term when I was there, Dick Cheney was an Iron Man. I mean, he worked hard, he got in the office early, and if that's how he performed when his heart was not working brilliantly, he would be ready to run a triathlon, I think, if his heart was working well.
And Hillary, he and Sanjay got into it a little bit yesterday on 60 Minutes about, well, Sanjay was saying, did anybody tell you that your judgment might be affected by what's going on with your heart and the medication? And the Vice President Cheney did not affect my judgment.
Well, because Sanjay was so thorough in that interview, and he unveiled study after study after study that actually shows that people who've had the kind of heart trouble that Dick Cheney's had, demonstrate a blurred judgment, a lack of focus, all sorts of things that, from my perspective, might explain some of Dick Cheney's decisions, but snap. And Cheney would have none of it. The other thing that I thought was fascinating was Sanjay challenged the very first, as we all remember, when George Bush first picked Dick Cheney to be his vice presidential candidate, and a letter was released from a doctor, a noted heart surgeon in Texas. Sanjay revealed, of course, that that doctor had never examined Cheney, that he basically talked to Cheney's best buddy, who is the heart surgeon who he wrote this book with, and gave it a clean bit of health. And last night Cheney said, well, if you have a problem with that, you're going to have to talk to him. I have no idea how he came to that conclusion.
Interesting. So, Manu, I want to bring in some new poll numbers about the shutdown. We'll change the subject if you'll let me. A brand new CNN ORC poll released this hour shows that 71% of voters think that most members of Congress should get the boot. But here's the number that could actually change something. Only 46% of respondents think their own lawmakers deserve re-election. That's down 4% from 2010. So should Republicans be worried or should they not?
I think they should. I mean, remember, Jake, as you know, a lot of times these polls show how unpopular Congress is, but the incumbents themselves generally fare decently. People generally like their members of Congress. But what we've seen through this whole shutdown and this crisis after crisis atmosphere in Washington is that incumbents are getting less and less popular. So this is a concern for Republicans. Of course, they have to keep the House next year. They're still favored to keep the House in the elections. But if there is another shutdown in January, if there's another crisis atmosphere and their party takes the blame for it, it's something they'll have to worry about. And it's something that the Senate Republican leader, Mitch McConnell, will have to worry about too. Yes, he cut the deal to reopen the government, but he's a leader of a party now that's experiencing extreme lows, and he's up for re-election in a tough state next year.
And David, I want to ask you about this poll number, which is also brand new. Who's too extreme? The Tea Party, extreme, 60%. Republican Party, extreme, 56%. Democratic Party, extreme, 42%. You recently wrote on CNN.com, David, that the Tea Party extremism contaminates the whole Republican brand. This has been something you've been talking about and has been winning you friends in your party for a long time.
Yes. The worry is, what I worry most about is not that people in November of 2014 will cast a ballot one way or the other because of events a year ago. I don't think people's memories work that way. But what does happen is parties build brands. Are you the responsible party? Can you be trusted? We saw what happened in the 1970s and 1980s when Democrats acquired a reputation as people who just couldn't be trusted with the responsibilities of government. They tended to lose a lot. First the presidency, then the Senate, then the House.
And that's why I wonder, Hillary, if Democrats are concerned about this healthcare.gov rollout, if this is actually a bigger deal than everybody in the Democratic Party is trying to make it seem, because this really does get at the heart of competence, which is one of the things that President Obama talked about in 2008 and 2012. This website is not being rolled out competently. I think that's fair to say.
It is fair to say, but I also think it's going to inure to the detriment of the president and the administration. I actually don't think that the Democrats in Congress are going to they're going to be able to distance themselves from it. I think the other interesting thing about this poll
You think members of Congress are going to distance themselves, Democrats, from the website?
Well, I just don't, I don't think that it's easy to say, well, of course it should have been rolled out better. I don't think they're going to wear the brunt of the problem, of the administrative problems. But, you know, for the first time, I think we may actually have Tea parties being the boogeyman in this race, the way that, you know, for instance, Nancy Pelosi was in the last congressional election. I think Democrats have a chance to actually run against the Tea Party in some of these close districts, and that's going to help us.
To be continued. Hillary, David, Manu, thank you.